Hi everybody, welcome back to another stream. Still have to get my lighting fixed, so it's a little darker than normal. It's funny, it worked the other day after the stream, and then I was like, oh, okay, we're good. And then it's not working again, so must not be meant for this stream, that's for sure. So I don't have the chat up yet. I will put it up in about 20 minutes, but I did want to talk about some stuff going on in the collectives. I want to talk about how timelines are collapsing on a macro level and a micro level. We're going to talk about why from a higher perspective than the human perspective. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is going to probably seem a little odd, and that's probably understating because a lot of stuff I say seems a little odd. But I do want to talk about this, and if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I will get to the chat in about 20 minutes. So I do read it. I just don't read it immediately, not in the beginning. We want to set the tone for the room. We want to set the energy for the room. That's more important in the beginning for me than the chat to start. So we're going to just flow from there and feel like what's appropriate to do. So the collectives. Service to humanity and your relationship with your collectives. That's where we're going to start with today, and then we can pivot later, but that's where we're going to start. A lot of people will see service to humanity as what someone like I might do. You might see people trying to push the collectives forward in different ways, but I want to segregate out different ways this is done, okay? And we're seeing it a lot. But a lot of times when you're in your human aspect, you don't see the full picture yet. Not because you don't have the capability to. You do always have the capability, you just don't have the access yet. Eventually you'll gain the access. When it's your time to gain the access, you'll gain the access. So it's not as so much of, oh, you can't see it, I can see it. You'll see that a lot in a lot of communities where they kind of play that ego game. It's just some people have more access than others because of where they're at. And that's where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to have more access. Because the minute you have more access to higher consciousness information, you have a responsibility to share that. So it activates someone else's consciousness. And if you don't do that, you don't really get the information anymore. So what's the old Spider-Man saying? With great power comes great responsibility. Any stream I can quote Spider-Man is going to be a pretty good one. I can feel it already. And that's true. So you have to look at something from a higher aspect, and sometimes we can get in our human stuff about things that go on in the world, and you can look at it and you can go in and out on it. But you have to be able to come back to your highest space. It's very important no matter what's going on. You have to be able to come back from your highest space, and sometimes we get tested on that. Can I come from my highest space? Even though the situation around me might feel like shit right now, I have to come from my highest aspect all the time. And that's not easy in the beginning. That's why we get so many chances to do it. We get so many trial runs to do it because it's a learning process. So that being said, we're going to talk about some of the stuff going on, and we're going to talk a little bit about cancel culture, is what a human will call it. If you're in your human ego aspect, and that's not a judgment, it's an observation of where certain people are in their process. If you are projecting a lot of judgment energy, even if you're not saying it, but you feel it, and you don't really judge it when you feel the judgment, but you definitely are in a different space with consciousness when you realize you're judging. When you realize, hey, I'm judging, what's going on? Well, let me try to clear this because I realize I'm doing it. It doesn't mean you're going to beat yourself up about it. Judgment is one of the last things to clear from the human template. It's a very tough one to get through for our ego because our whole reality is kind of based on judgment. The whole 3D construct is based on judgment of everybody else. That's how you keep people in the 3D construct. You can't keep people in that construct if there's no judgment for leaving it. If there's no worry about leaving it, people don't stay in it. A lot of people stay. I don't really want to use the word stuck because you're really not stuck. Just you haven't taken the exit yet. It's not your time yet to take the exit yet. You get ingrained in it, which is what you were supposed to do in the beginning. That's why you were here, to kind of get immersed in the whole thing. But then there comes a time when you're supposed to get out of it. and everyone has that different clock. No one has the same timeline with that. There are some collectives that are on a similar track, but even in that, everyone has their own way in it. So what exactly is service to humanity? People do it in a lot of different ways. People can do it like I do it, which is I go on a stream about higher consciousness stuff to activate other people's consciousness, to try to move humanity in a different space. Some people paint, some people write, some people gift a lot of money to different things they feel are going to assist humanity. People can be in service to humanity in a lot of different ways. When you reach certain levels of consciousness, that's what your job's supposed to be. How you do that job is what you see fit to do. Every day that might be different. Every day there might be a different thing you're supposed to do. Like yesterday for me, I could have done a stream, but I really needed to clean the house and I had some other timelines going on I had to take care of in the house yesterday. So I had other places I needed to be. And even though maybe part of me wanted to be on a stream, it wasn't what I was supposed to do yesterday. It wasn't in the cards for me. And I knew that very early on, that's not what I was going to do. So people would say, okay, well, that's service to humanity, right? That's an easy one to identify. That's service to humanity. Okay, so what happens when you see this other stuff? Now, there's a lot of stuff going on in cancel culture. And the people who are getting canceled are doing a service to humanity. And that's going to seem like doesn't make a lot of sense. How is that assisting anybody when someone does this or someone does this? And it doesn't matter what they did, what they said they did. That is not important. It's not important to the energy of what's going on. They're still in service to humanity because they're triggering other people. They're triggering other people's judgment. They're triggering other people's anger. They're triggering other people's blame energy. They're triggering other people's victim energy. They're triggering other people. They're clearing other people. That's a service to humanity. Now, with cancel culture, it tends to go to people who are more in the limelight, right? Because people who are not in any type of position where they're not in the limelight, it's not going to matter what they do. And that's going to sound condescending, and it's not really meant to be condescending. But if certain people are in what you would call a successful third dimensional reality, and in turn, there are really no successful third dimensional realities. There's no successful human reality. If you're looking at it from a higher aspect, it's really not successful. There's really no success in a third dimensional reality. But when you're in it, there are certain things that are marked as successful by yourself, by others, by the collectives you're in that seem, oh, that's a successful person. That person has thrived in that collective. That person has thrived in that dimension. That's a very successful dimension for them. So when it comes their time to ascend, and you're seeing this all over the place, and there's a lot of different reasons all these timelines are coming together. A lot of this stuff has to be cleared from the collectives. It has to move the collective forward. Cancel culture became a thing because it's what's necessary to clear the stuff from the human body, to clear the blame, to clear the judgment. Now, people are going through the energy. They're finding something they can grab onto and say, that's good, that's bad, that's okay, that's not okay. And everyone's going to feel different on that. It doesn't really matter how you feel about any of it. That's not what this stream is really about. How you personally feel, it has to do with what's going on with you. It's never about the other people who trigger it all. It's how do you feel about it? Now, how do I set on some of this? What is going on if you take it from a higher perspective? So you have people who are deemed very successful in third dimensional realities. Now, if you're very successful in any type of third dimensional reality, why would you leave? A lot of people in a lot of journeys start to exit the human realities because they don't find them satisfying. And that's not saying people who have had success in those realities don't also leave them on their own accordance, right? But there's a lot of realities that we don't get to leave on our own accordance. We just don't. A lot of our realities have collapsed. We don't get to leave them on our own terms. We have to leave them because it's our universe telling us, you can't stay here anymore. This is closing out. There's a zillion reasons it's closing out, and you can grab onto it till the end, but you got to go. But a lot of times those things really weren't working anyway. And if you pull the curtain back on a lot of realities, the human realities really don't work. But when you're in them, there are certain reasons why you feel like they're working. If you're successful in your job, if you're successful in your money, if you feel like you have made some type of impact somewhere, then you're successful in that reality. There's some kind of bar there for you. That's a successful person. You'll hear that a lot. That person is this person is that. And it doesn't matter really how it's deemed successful, but in a third dimensional reality, it's going to be deemed differently than in a 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th dimensional reality. It's always going to be a level of what do you gauge as successful? Does it really matter what's successful? Who decides that? And really that's more in us. That's why you see a lot of really, people call them type A personalities, really successful people keep going, because even when they reach certain things, they're not really happy with where they are. The finish line keeps getting moved, but that's in all of our third dimensional realities. It's just some people have more of a presence overall. So when you see someone who is more, we're going to call it in the spotlight, tumble down, realities collapse on them, and they collapse in a public way. And you've seen it years and years and years. It doesn't matter if they're, from athletes to actors to directors to authors to painters, it does not matter. Political, name it. Name the genre. It does not matter. And it's a reason why it touches everybody, because different people get spun up about the collectives they're more attached to. If you're connected to a political collective, and that's just a collective you aspire up to, and aspire is probably not the word, but you kind of attach up to something in that arena affects you. And that's how you know you're in that collective. When something happens in there and you have a reaction to it, you're attached to that collective. Even if you don't feel that much emotion, but your body has a reaction, it's more of an energetic reaction and not an emotional reaction, because they are different things. Your DNA can still be attached to that collective. Somewhere you still have attachment to it, even if you don't have the emotions that come with it. Because a human's going to go with emotion first. When you're in the higher realms, emotion comes last, in a sense. You know it's there, you know you have to clear it, but it doesn't control what you do. When you're in your human aspect, emotions control what you do. You go with emotions. And people mistake that as going with their heart. Emotions are not your heart. Emotions block the heart in a sense. You can't really see things clearly. But everyone agrees to everything ahead of time. Everything that happens in our life, we've agreed to it. Now, when people are in their harsher, what they would deem as a harsh point, and we've all had them, me included, we've all had some really harsh points in our timelines. When you're in those timelines, you don't want to hear that. No one wants to hear, oh, everything happens for a reason. Oh, it don't get better. Nobody wants to hear that. You don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear anybody say it. That's not the frequency you're in, and you don't want to hear it. But when you start to see things collapse, it has to be certain people in certain genres it happens to. Some people affect collectives because they might exit the planet, they exit through death, and that affects a lot of people. If it felt like they were too young or whatever, it doesn't matter the story around it, but they affect the collectives. They move the collectives forward because it clears the sadness and the grief. Not really attached to that person, though people will contribute it to that person because that's what activated it for them. And the same thing when you get into more of a cancel culture. I don't like to use that word. It's a very 3D word, but just to I want to try to connect the dots a little bit on this today. It clears blame. It clears victim. It clears anger. It clears judgment out of the collectives. Doesn't matter which side you're on. It never matters. And you're going to hear me say that a zillion times on any stream I do. Never matters which side you're on. Nobody really cares. Nobody cares which side you're on. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what point you're trying to make. None of that matters. It's the energy that's being cleared. But this had to happen in this way to move that collective forward. It had to clear from the collective. This is something that gets everybody going. So the people who do these things, we're supposed to do those things. They're in service to humanity. They're just in service in a different way than I'm in service to humanity, or someone else you might see where you might say, oh yeah, they really care about humanity because of this. Oh, this person doesn't care about humanity because they said this or wrote this or did this act. They don't care about humanity. Now, is it consciously they know what they're, no. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Normally when you're seeing your third dimensional realities collapse, and we've seen it for years for so many people, it's because we don't understand. We don't understand why all this is happening. We don't understand this is what we agreed to. We agreed to push the collective forward. We agreed to do that. And sometimes it seems harsher for people who have had success in a lot of these third dimensional realities because they wouldn't leave otherwise. It looks too green over there. It's really not. And that's kind of a blanket statement, but I'm doing it more to make a point because a lot of people who've had very successful human realities realize eventually they're not worth their weight in anything. And they opt for something else. They opt for a higher consciousness, higher aspect reality in a different path on their own. But everyone is in service to humanity. Everything you do every day is in service to humanity in some way. It might not be on a grand scale, and it might not be in the way you want to be in service to humanity. You might want to be in service to humanity because you're going to go, donate money to some organization, and you want that to be your service to humanity. But if you go out and treat someone kind of shitty, and someone puts that on, tapes it, puts it on YouTube or Facebook, and everyone gets pissed at you, and it triggers all that anger in someone, that's also in service to humanity. It's just not the way you want it to be in service to humanity in a human aspect. From your human aspect, that's not what you wanted. Your soul aspect, that's what you agreed to. That was a bigger impact than donating a lot of money to this organization in that instance. Every instance is going to be different. But just to kind of clarify what I'm trying to say, we're always in service. It might not be the way we want to be. We might be dragged out of third dimensional realities and ostracized from the whole collectives because we wouldn't have left on our own. A lot of us in different ways now. You've seen it through cancel culture. You've seen it through, I really don't like the word cancel. I've tried to think of a higher dimensional word I can use for that. And I can't get one, but it's just what I'm going to use for today. I'll try to find a better one. I'll try to see if I can get a better word. I don't really like that word. I don't like the vibration of that word. But we wouldn't move on otherwise. Sometimes you have to be shut out of it. And you saw that a lot. You've seen that a lot. And it seems to be not as prevalent, but I don't really keep as much on top of it. When you go through the whole vaccine question, some people are going to get shut out of different aspects of society, no matter which way you fall on it. Because you can't be in that, you can't be there anymore. You're not supposed to be in those human realities anymore. You now have to go do something else. So you're not going to be shut down from it. It's going to be cut off for you because you have to do something else. Your exit might have been a massive service to humanity to clear a lot of stuff from people. But for a lot of us, we wouldn't have left if certain things don't get cut out and shut down. And sometimes it can be very abrupt. But everyone is in service to humanity. And it comes a time and a consciousness, more maybe a space and a consciousness where you just thank people for their service. You might say, wow, that's service. To know what. And that's not to put a victim energy on it. And it can spin like, oh, that feels like it's a victim on the other side. Or you're going to reverse the victim energy and now that person's the victim. It's not about victim. It triggers victim energy in everyone involved. But it's just to trigger the energy. It's not so much painting the story for anybody. Everyone personally will paint that story or won't paint that story on themselves. It's not about painting that story on people. It's looking at how they served humanity. What transpires when this happens? When anything happens? Why that person? Why there? Why did it have to happen that way? You start to unravel the realities. And sometimes it's easier to unravel somebody else's. because you don't have an emotional tie to it. And you can look at it and go, I understand. I understand why this is having to happen this way. Not understanding every aspect of every timeline they're playing out. Sometimes you can, sometimes it's not your place to look at that unless someone asks you to look at that. It's not your place to do that. But you can understand why it moves the needle so much, why people are getting shut out of collectives. It's clearing so much judgment energy, but people are judgment energy. Also knowing that the more you judge someone else, you're going to come back and get that in your face at some point. That's just how that's going to work. Judgment energy, you are clearing it, but you're also going to take on some karma when you clear it like that. And it's going to come back and someone's going to judge you for something you did. Or more or less, we just judge ourselves. No one judges anyone harder than we judge ourselves. We like to project it on other people because we don't want to, but it's really just our own, because everyone's an aspect of us in some way. They're an aspect of us. We might not like the aspect we see, but they're still an aspect of us. It's still what's going on. It's still looking at the energetics of everything, looking at how it moves the collectives, look at what it's clearing in the collectives, look what, the souls are, I'm going to just call them souls. Look what these souls are doing to push humanity forward. It might not be pretty. It might not be any reality anyone would look at and go, wow, I'm glad I didn't choose that one. That's a tough path. I'm glad I didn't do that one. I'm glad that wasn't my path. I'd rather do this one. Sometimes I look at service to humanity can be a beautiful job. And some days it can be an agitational job. As someone who does it, it can make you agitated. When I'm clearing a lot of that, no one seems to appreciate anything. But that's just energy we all kind of work through. Because when you're in service to humanity, you see how human everybody is. And that's not a judgment. It's just where different collectives are. Not everyone's in that space. But you can see that more. And the more you are in service to humanity, the more you kind of feel separated from it all. And the more detached you get from it all, the more you can really look at it and see, wow, that is kind of messed up the way a lot of the stuff in the last couple of years has gone down, and the piling on, but those people are playing a part in that collective too, to take those people out of where they are right now. You can't be here anymore. You have to go now to this a different collective. You can't be in this mainstream anymore. You have something you have to do, so we're going to shut you out of it. In a higher dimensional, higher aspect level, that's what they're doing. They're fulfilling their soul contracts. This person's fulfilling that soul contract. It's not the acts. Everyone's getting into the story and into who says what and what someone dared or what someone didn't do back from the beginning of, when all this started balancing back out on the planet. But look at the energetics of what's going on. It's always going to be the most important thing. It's the energetics of the realities. And sometimes it's easier, like I said, to look at somebody else's, look at what's going on before you look at our own. We have a lot of emotion around our own. We might not like our own to look at them. But if we take ourselves out of that and we start looking at someone else's, not to judge it, just to observe it. And there's totally different energies into judging it or just observing it and go, oh, I can see the higher purposes this is going to serve. And it is serving. And that soul's doing a massive service for humanity. You might not enjoy the way it's playing out, but it doesn't mean it's not a massive service for humanity. And that's the most, I want to say important, but I don't really like that. I don't think that's probably the word I don't really want to use that word, but I'm going to. Probably the most important thing to look at. Though there's so many important things to look at. Maybe we would say it's one of the things to look at. Look at the energetics of what goes on. Look at the purpose it can serve. Look at why some people get shut out. Sometimes we can't exist. And there's a lot of different things going on in a lot of different collectives to shut certain segments of people out of human realities right now. We're going to make it so bad you can't come back in. whether it's for this reason or that reason, you got to get out of here because you can't be here anymore. Now we've also talked about how things are weakened in a collective. Some people get ostracized from the collectives and they get removed. Sometimes we remove ourselves from collectives. Sometimes people try to take the collectives down from the top down. They go to war with the collectives and try to take them down that way. It depends on the energy you're in as to how you're going to handle a lot of that stuff. But when you are in a judgment energy, and it doesn't matter what you're judging, don't even judge the fact that you're in the judgment energy. Just go, oh yeah, I'm clearing judgment energy here. What's going on with this? Like, why am I painting a whole story, or I'm getting all wrapped up? Because everyone gets all wrapped up in the story. They're still clearing the energy because they're all wrapped up in the story. Just a harder way to do it, and it's a longer way to do it. It's a much longer way to do it because all that stuff gets in our way. It all gets in our way. It gets in the way of being able to see the higher dimensions, to understand the timelines, understand why things are happening the way they are, because we all have a capability to have that access. We just have not cleared enough human stuff to gain the access yet, but everyone has the capability. So I think I've kind of brought that point home. So I'm going to open the chat. I don't know if this is going to be a really long one today. I don't know if it really needs to be. Hold on. Let me see if there is another thing I can get into. I really don't have anything. We need to talk about on the chat today. There is one, I don't even know if there's a good way to say this. And this might not be the stream. This might not be the stream to get into this. When you look at different segments of the population, and everyone identifies with certain body forms, whether you be male, whether you be female, everyone is going to identify with something. And the more you transcend the ego, you start transcending the identities of that. You start transcending the identities of anything you identified with. If you really identify with being a male, you'll start, not that you might become less masculine, because that's really, you just stop identifying with that. If you really identified with your job and that's gone, you stop identifying with that. Whatever you identified with, whatever collectives you identify with, you'll start to see a lot of that stuff leaving, your field. You don't have the identity, you don't have the attachment to it. But cellularly, in your cells, you still can be connected up until the collectives go through a collective clearing of that energy. Then you'll do a more energetic clearing, a more cellular clearing of that energy. You're still somehow connected to some of that stuff. That's why you can see a lot of, I don't even know the way to put this. You'll see a lot of things said about women, things said about men. It doesn't really matter what is said. Things about different races, different religions, none of that really matters. And that kind of can go back into cancel culture. But what is okay? And you'll find some things are done and it seems to be okay. In certain collectives, that's okay. In certain collectives, that seems to be okay, to come down hard on women, to come down hard on men, to come down hard on this religion. That's okay. That seems okay in this space, right? And no one really care about that. There are things that trigger humanity more than other things. I mean, maybe that's the way I'll start with this. Pet abuse triggers humanity worse than people abuse. And people could argue with me on that, but I think most people would agree. It pisses the collectives off more when someone abuses animals than when someone abuses people. Children are kind of the outlier there. That's another thing that riles people up. Some things trigger different things in people. right? Some things just trigger different things. And everyone's like, why is that? Why are we so desensitized to where, I'm going to use an example, and it's just to use an example, violence against, and there's no personal attachment to this. It's just going to be an example where a violence toward an animal might be really rile up a lot of the collectives more than a violence toward women. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a woman. Or that aspect, that's how many people will see me, as, a female form. But you can just see that there's a disparity there. And that's more of what I want you to see by that example. There's a disparity there. Certain things piss off the different collectives more because there's a story that goes around when you're talking human to human where they don't have that story when you're talking about an animal, right? The animals don't have the ego programming. They don't have the human programming. They're developed differently. They have a different aspects to them. There's a different feeling. Plus are always there for their human counterparts. People always feel a connection there. Well, they don't always feel a connection with human to human. It can be a pet no one's ever seen, but if you see something abused, it automatically gets the collectives. Certain collectives will ping on that, and it will get more judgment than human on human violence. Now, there's a lot of different reasons that plays out. Is it more than just what I said? There's more than just that one thing. But in our DNA, we also have cellular memory of every reality every reality we've ever been in. So if there's been consensual abuse, consensual is not the word I want to use, but in a way, I guess it would be, because we do kind of consent to everything. That's a higher version way to look at it, a higher aspect way to look at it. We do kind of consent to everything, so there's no victim energy. But if we have a memory of that, I think cellularly we go back to some of that programming. Where, okay, well, that's okay here, but no, that's not okay here. So just look at what sets you off. That's going to show you, what do you deem more important than something else? Why does that not piss you off as much as this piss you off? Why does this trigger anger, but this doesn't trigger anger? It should, but it doesn't. Or should it? I don't know. That's what you want to look at. You want to look at what gets you. What would you, if we go back to even the cancel culture of earlier, what would get you to really judge another person? Or not in this case? Where's your, I'm going to use the word limit, like where's your limit at? Everyone has a limit. Everyone has a limit on what they think is okay, what's not okay, how come this is okay and this isn't okay. And when you start to look at that, a lot of third dimensional stuff starts to unravel. But we have to realize we all play a part in it, because we all link up to certain collectives. We all link up to certain things. We might not like that, but it's not important enough for me to take a stand on that. This is, but this isn't. It can be really wobbly realities for a while on what we take a stand on, what we don't take a stand on. So I think on that, I don't think I probably explained that last part as well as I wanted to, but I might come back to that one later. I don't know if I might not be the right time for that one. Might be another time for that one. So if I don't have any questions, hello everybody. If I don't have any questions, I am going to sign off. Not more important, I guess. It's same level of importance as everything else. There's really nothing more important. It's always going to be the energetics of the situations we have to look at, and why things happen the way they do, why things happen to the people the way they do. Why are certain people born in the limelight and have to go through more things than other people? Why does it have to be that person? Why did it have to happen to them? You see that a lot said when someone, dies early. I think I talked about this earlier. I shift frequencies a lot, so I kind of forget what I talk about. And then I go back and then I don't know if I've said it. Why does that sports figure have to die early? Because it triggers all this emotion in the sports community, which that's the person that had to go to trigger that. It had to be that person to do that service. Because in a sense, death is a service to humanity. It pulls someone out of the different collectives they're in. It triggers all that sadness and grief for the people who were in those realities with that person and whoever they touched. And if they were a more known person in different collectives, in different segments, they're going to trigger a lot more people. There's always a reason. It's still a service to humanity. It just, Everything is a service to humanity. Whether you look at that as like, oh, that's not a service to humanity, look at your judgment and limits on what's a service and what's not a service. What are you judging as that's not a service, but oh, this is a service? Or that person is more of a service because they did this or did that, and that person's not. It's more important to look at, I guess importance is going to be my word of the day because I keep repeating it. How you feel about it and your judgments around it are always going to be your tell. You know, everyone has a tell on what collectives there are more collectives they're attached up to, what energy they're clearing. There's always a tell for everybody. Certain people get you, certain people don't. Everyone has a tell. You have to figure out what your tell is. What gets to you? What doesn't get to you? Why does that get you, but this doesn't bother you? What people get to you? Those are the most telling things about where you're at in your process. Because there will be a point when you clear all that energy around that tell, you'll figure out another one. And people will call it a tell. It's really, you're just looking at your programming. How are you cellularly wired? You're going to be cellularly wired because you have human DNA until you start recoding your DNA. A lot of people are very similarly wired in a sense. That's why you have collectives. That's why different people will match up to different collectives. Look at what your tells are. So I think for that, I am going to leave this today, and I appreciate everybody listening, and I'll see everybody next time. Bye.